Tennis at the 2024 US Open was complicated to say the least, and the plot thickened as the week progressed. Big matchups and disappointments. The American men flying high, while the men's draw was simultaneously falling apart. Historic moments, and of course, brilliant wins from the very best. With the 2024 US Open already in the books, it's now time to reflect on the biggest talking points and storylines from the tournament. The three-week event was off to a great start, with record attendance at Fan Week, which, by the way, is the week just before the main action. We saw close to 240,000 on-site engagements during Fan Week, which is a 37% increase from last year. It was definitely an auspicious sign, but fast forward to the first week of the tournament, and what do we find? Novak and Alcaraz getting kicked out of the tournament in a hurry.
The defending champion is out. Baltic Bend Essential stuns the tennis world.
I already did a full breakdown of what went wrong for both of them, and it seemed like the hangover from the Olympics was the main cause. They just didn't go into the US Open in optimal shape. But then, what went wrong for Holger Rune? A first-round loss to Brandon Nakashima was shocking in some way, because Rune is obviously the much higher-ranked player. However, Nakashima had been in good form and had won all of their previous meetings, so it wasn't exactly strange. Nakashima is 3-0 against Rune and is also 3-0 against Tommy Paul. He's a pretty big guy with very solid ground strokes, especially on the backhand. Nakashima has bumped up his serve and has been looking good on the hard courts too for a while. I was also particularly impressed with his third-round win against Musetti. Let me remind you that Nakashima started the year outside the top 100, but is now in the top 40. I personally feel like his resurgence has flown under the radar a little bit, but I'm eager to see how he performs from here on out because that guy definitely has top 20 potential. But for Holger Rune, his confidence just hasn't been the same. On the court, he still has problems with shot selection, going too big, and hitting too hard from poor positions. Against Nakashima, Rune was missing so many shots in the 0-4 shot rallies, particularly on his serve. Since Rune's 2022 win in Paris, so many fans have put him in the same category as Sinner and Alcaraz, saying that he has just as much talent. Honestly, I don't think we should be doing that right now because Sinner and Alcaraz are currently levels above him. Until Rune finds more consistency and breaks out of the top 20 zone he's been in the last couple months, I'm not really bullish about him at the moment. I really hope I regret this statement though, because the guy's clearly got potential, but losing 15 of your last 18 matches against top 20 players doesn't help anyone. Hopefully he gets a stable team behind him to right the ship. But moving forward, I might talk about the current crop of South American players, particularly the Argentines because they are killing it these days. Sebastian Baez, Echeverri, Francisco Cerundolo, Mariano Navone, these are all top 20, top 30 guys. And then we have Diaz Acosta, Comesaña, Coria, Cashin, Tirante, Carabelli, and a couple of other guys. Argentina has a strong presence inside the top 100, and while none of them are exactly a Juan Martín del Potro talent, I think they deserve a shout out. Let me know what you guys think of them. Tsitsipas losing in the first round was just something that I wasn't surprised about. The US Open has been his worst slam after all. He's never made it past the third round, so I definitely wasn't too bullish on him coming into the tournament, and more so, he was coming off the back of disappointing losses in Montreal and Cincinnati. Now 12th in the race to Turin, Tsitsipas will need something special to sneak into the ATP Finals. But there has been some drama recently. The Tsitsipas have taken legal action against his former physiotherapist, Jerome Bianchi, for his comments to L'Equipe. According to Bianchi, many players have chosen to no longer train alongside Stefanos because his father, who happens to be a chatterbox, prevented them from concentrating. We also saw Hugo Humbert get upset in the second round. Humbert was flying high from the second half of last year and through the first 3 months of this year. He won a couple of titles during that time, and then he just fell off. I haven't been following Humbert's matches recently, so if anyone has an idea why he's struggling, let me know in the comments. I know he had a knee injury earlier in the clay season though. There were upsets in the early rounds. Seb Korda, Karen Khachanov, Felix Auger-Aliassime, Hurkacz, Jarry, and Bublik. For Bublik, you just never know what to expect. Sometimes, it doesn't even feel like an upset anymore. The match between Evans and Khachanov was definitely the highlight of the tournament's first 2 rounds. It was the longest US Open match in history, 5 hours and 35 minutes. Trailing love 4 and facing a further 4 breakpoints in the 5th set, Evans pulled a Houdini on court 6. And there was also a great backstory to it. Not defending his points in Washington in order to team up with Andy Murray in his final tournament, Evans fell more than 110 spots down the rankings. Barely able to find a win in 2024, it was so impressive seeing him sacrifice a lot of points to represent his country at the Olympics. Unfortunately for Khachanov though, the Dan Evans problem continues. Khachanov has lost all 5 of their matches. With the men's draw falling apart, I thought we were going to be seeing players like Rublev, Ruud, Zverev, and Dimitrov capitalize on a rare opportunity to boost their chances of bagging a maiden Grand Slam. But it didn't quite happen. Also, Popyrin and Botic van de Zandschulp, both of whom kicked out Djokovic and Alcaraz, got beaten in the next round by opponents they had a much better chance against. Missed opportunities for all of these guys, but not for the Americans. They weren't going to be just spectators at their home tournament. Here's what I think about some of the Americans' performances. Tiafoe decided a few weeks back that he was just done losing to clowns. He reached the quarters in Atlanta, the semis in Washington, and the final in Cincinnati, so he definitely had picked up some form. Also, Tiafoe is that player who decides to just peak at the US Open every year, so we knew he was up to something. Revenge was on the menu against Shelton in the 3rd round in what was one of the best matches of the opening week. Tiafoe then took down Popyrin and Dimitrov before falling in the semis. And at this point, you ask yourself, what makes Tiafoe play his best tennis during the US Open? Well, we know he loves playing for the crowd and is popular among the fans, but you can't help but wonder what will happen if he channels this same energy at tournaments outside the United States. I also think that he still has some work to do in his physical conditioning across 5-setters, because he tends to fade at times, just like what we saw against Fritz in the semis. For Shelton, I'm still sold on him because I think he has the most room for improvement of any of the top Americans. He's far from being a finished product, and there's a lot to look forward to. Despite his disappointing early exit, Shelton inadvertently left us with an iconic post-match moment.
Hey, I'm in a press conference, Dad. Okay, yeah, I'll be out in a couple minutes.
But I was most impressed with Taylor Fritz, not just because he made the final, but because of everything he went through to get there. Fritz has carried the weight of expectation for so long, and we've sometimes been guilty of focusing too much on his limitations with movement, volleys, and net play. Being one of the most hardworking players on tour, Fritz 100% deserved to make it to the final regardless of how the draw played out. Besides, he still had to get through tough opponents in Casper Ruud and Zverev, who he's been beating more often recently. Because of the weight on his shoulders, Fritz has always been hard on himself and has been his biggest critic. But look at how much this final meant to him.
I mean, I'm in the finals of the US Open.
In my opinion, Big Foe should have given Fritz more credit instead of saying that he himself was the better player.
I mean, I thought I was a better player for sure tonight.
Rolling with the punches as the tournament went on, Jack Draper reached his first Grand Slam semifinal without dropping a single set. And while I think it's great, I think it was a little overlooked because he only faced 1 seed en route to the semis. It was Alex de Minaur's first tournament since his hip injury, so he also wasn't exactly at 100%. That being said, we know just how much damage Draper's wicked lefty serve, along with his heavy topspin forehand, bring to the table. His top 20 breakthrough is only the beginning of more incredible things to come for him, and it was such a shame that he was off his game in the semis. Looking at that Draper match, it had me thinking about the impact of hydration on performance. Lots of athletes do hydration differently, and pickle juice has been proven to replenish electrolytes and key nutrients. I use the hydration shooters from SuckerPunch to stay on top of my game. Give them a try the next time you're on court, and let me know how they work for you. Anyways, over to the man of the moment, Jannik Sinner. Words fail me to describe how good this guy is on court. If you've seen him in person, I believe you'd appreciate even more how cleanly he hits the ball and how well he moves watching him live. The split step, the explosiveness out of the corners, and how he manages to maintain balance at all times is just beyond me. Also, looking at the mechanics of his stroke and the way his arm works as a slingshot on the court is something that needs to be studied. Switching gears to the WTA, I thought the women delivered big time in terms of brilliance and level on the court. Sabalenka showed us once again why she's the most dominant hardcourt player we've seen in a while. She's now 27-1 in hardcourt slams since the start of 2023. Now that's what you call dominance. Sabalenka dropped only 1 set in the entire tournament, which was against Ekaterina Alexandrova in the 3rd round. If you've been following Sabalenka's matches for a while now, and yeah, I know those grunts, or should I say screams, are really loud, you'll notice that she has a lot more nuance to her game. In addition to taking the racket out of your hand with her power, which is already too much to handle, Sabalenka moves a lot better, has more variety and better positioning, and comes to the net more often than most on the WTA Tour. It might not be the prettiest, but she gets the job done. Sabalenka also now recovers from rough patches during sets better than before. And I also have to mention that she's overcome a lot of obstacles in the past. Her journey from having problems with her serve, the challenging life events and the loss of her dad, and mental growth up to the point where she knew that she could only help herself has made it amazing to watch Sabalenka evolve into who she is now. On top of that, her shenanigans with her team, the goofing around, and hilarious social moments only add to her appeal. I'll be doing a deep dive on Sabalenka in the coming week, so be sure to let me know your questions, hot takes, and opinions over in the Discord chat. Sabalenka versus Zhang in the quarterfinal was one of the biggest disappointments, with Zhang only winning 3 games. But I can't say it was shocking. Zhang hasn't managed to take a set off of Sabalenka in their 3 matches so far, and she hasn't even won more than 5 games in total. So safe to say it's been a difficult matchup for her. In addition to critiquing her game, Zhang mentioned that finishing at 2:15 a.m. in her 3-set thriller against Donna Vekic didn't help matters either.
The last match I finished really late, so yesterday I cannot have my proper practice because I have no energy from no sleep.
How do we actually prevent late finishes? Sabalenka then fought off Emma Navarro in the semis before taking down Jessica Pegula in the final. In both of those matches, she recovered to win in straight sets after blowing a lead. Pegula made more first serves, but just couldn't protect her second serves as much as she would have liked, so Sabalenka was able to bully her in that regard. The end result, Pegula only managed 21%. Sabalenka also showed how much of a complete player she is by becoming the far superior player at net, especially in the clutch moments. With her 3rd slam now in the bag, only about 400 points separate Sabalenka from Iga in the race to the WTA finals. So she definitely has momentum on her side to finish the year as world number 1. But how did the American women perform? Pegula's appearance in a slam final was long overdue, considering how good she is. Her win against Swiatek in the quarterfinal, and her performance, her dramatic comeback against Karolina Muchova in the semis, and the display against Sabalenka in the final should give Pegula a lot more confidence moving forward. Her ground strokes have always been highly efficient, but if she can work on being more explosive out of the corners, she's going to be a real problem for Sabalenka, and it wouldn't be difficult to see her winning a slam. Emma Navarro is now in the top 10 for the first time in her career. What stands out to me is Emma's work ethic. You see, she and Pegula have had the billionaire tag on them, but they've shown that they're just as hungry as any other player. Just like Pegula, Navarro is an excellent pace absorber. Maybe an extra 10 or 15% is missing on the offense, and could be what is needed going forward to take her game to the next level. For Coco, there's been a lot of criticism on her serve completely falling apart against Navarro. How often do we see a Grand Slam champion making 19 double faults in a 3-set match? Knowing how bad her serve has been, we've seen the shots behind her serve equally affected, which often spirals down to ultimately affecting her confidence. Coco, more than anyone else, needs the offseason to completely revamp her service motion. Andy Roddick, what do you think? For Sloane Stephens, her US Open was a disaster after having one of the biggest chokes against Clara Burrell. After winning the first 9 games, Sloane was on her way to serving her opponent a double bagel with a 3-love lead and was even up 4-1 and 2 breaks in the second set, but somehow found a way to lose the set despite serving for the match even at 5-4. She took the lead in the 3rd set again and was up 4-2, but then ended up losing the match. That match would be a difficult one to forget for sure, but we need to remind ourselves about Sloane's demeanor. She's definitely not the most expressive player on tour. Happy or sad, her emotions might fool you into thinking she doesn't care that much, but she shouldn't be getting so much hate for choking. And as for Danielle Collins, she didn't get the ending to her Grand Slam career that she would have loved following a first-round loss to Caroline Dolehide. DC was so upset that she didn't wait for the presentation organized for her, but looking back, she should be proud of everything she's achieved on her last year on tour. Taking a look at the rest of the WTA players, Elena Rybakina's endless withdrawals continue to be a source of concern for us all. Just before the US Open, Rybakina split with Stefano Vukov, her coach of 5 years, and wasn't ready to talk about the situation. She's also just withdrawn from Seoul. The undisclosed injuries, the health problems, or whatever it is, we can hope that it's nothing too serious, but just take a look at all the big events she's pulled out of this season. Dubai, Indian Wells, Rome, Berlin, Eastbourne, the Olympics, Toronto, and the US Open. For Yulia Putintseva, she was at the center of this ugly moment with a ball kid in her match against Paolini. It wasn't a good look, and she got a lot of hate from fans. To her credit though, Putintseva has since apologized. Let's briefly talk about Emma Raducanu. Her scheduling hasn't been great, and it looks like she hasn't been willing to play qualies when she doesn't get a wild card. This has affected her terribly, and she hasn't been able to build momentum from solid performances in tournaments. For instance, she had a decent quarterfinal run in Washington, but then didn't play in Canada and Cincinnati. I don't know if there were any other reasons why she didn't play, but obviously it wasn't the ideal preparation for the US Open, and she ended up getting bounced in the first round. Going forward, I would love to see her taking more advantage of the momentum she's able to generate. Two players who have also been able to do that are Badosa and Muchova. Badosa has struggled with so many injuries in the past, but has been riding the hot hand in the last couple tournaments she's played in. Her reward for that? A top 20 presence once again. If she manages to stay fit, Badosa will be a problem for anyone, and the same goes for Muchova. She'll still be gutted after losing that semifinal to Pegula after being in control for a set and a half, but looking at how far she's come since her wrist surgery last year, it's definitely been a successful campaign for the Czech. Despite the grounds being packed with celebrities, the US Open men's final between Jannik Sinner and Taylor Fritz was the least watched men's final since 2020. It averaged 1.8 million viewers across ABC and ESPN+, which is down 31% from last year's final. That was partly due to the fact that the final aired 2 hours earlier and competed with NFL games, which combined to average more than 30 million views on Fox and CBS. The numbers were also down for the women's final. You'll notice that most of the players who did well at the US Open skipped the Olympics. We've reached a breaking point in the scheduling, and with the organizing bodies deciding to add an extra week to some Masters 1000 tournaments to give players a day off in between matches, and with more and more tournaments being played, players can barely catch a break. It just doesn't look good. Now, the word on the street is that an ATP-WTA merger is expected in 2025. The ATP makes about 4 times more revenue than the WTA does. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work out for both tours, and it looks like no one is 100% sure just yet. But what a time to be a tennis fan. We might be done with Grand Slams for the year, but the season is far from over. After the Davis Cup, we have the Asian swing up next, with a couple of 250s in Chengdu and Hangzhou, and then 500 tournaments in Tokyo and Beijing, before we head off to the Laver Cup. Plenty of ranking points to fight for, and plenty of spots left to be filled up in the ATP race to Turin. You can keep up with all the action here on Courtside Tennis by smashing that subscribe button, and if you haven't already, check out our Discord communities and newsletter, where we answer your questions on all things tennis. Until next time, keep going for the lines.